Alright guys, welcome back. In the last video, you guys saw that Nick dropped off the 24s for the big van build. What he also dropped off is the wagon. This wagon is his, so we're going to put in a Stereo Integrity 3-way front set. It's going to have 6-inch, 3-inch, and a tweet. This car has a factory tweeter location, 6.5. And it also has a unique spot here. There's a 3-inch that they had in the kicks. As you can see, I've already pulled the head unit, pulled the trim around the shifter, and the ashtray is out and on the table, so I can work with that. I'm going to end up putting the controller for the processor in there. His 9906, it's going in. And if we come to the back, this is what we're dealing with back here. The previous owner had a suitcase sub right here, so that was the cutout where the sub played. We're going to use this airspace here for this enclosure, and the whole idea with this car is to do a stealth build. We're going to keep all this cargo space and essentially just give it one of the looks to where that when you get in it, you don't know what's in there. It looks like it just came that way from the factory. So daily driver, he can throw his family in it, he can go to Costco, Sam's, wherever, throw all of his groceries, water, whatever in there, and have all of the space that he's used to having with the car now and not losing anything with the system. And in the back, in the spare tire area of the car, I'm going to put in his new SQL 15 in 2 cubic feet seal. Amplifiers will be Sundown Salt Series multi-channel prototypes, and I'll be using a Helix DSP Pro Mark II for processor, and the head unit will be Kenwood's 9906. So before I can start installing everything, I'm going to tackle the trunk first, because that's where most of the fabrication is going to be. So what I'm going to have to do is drill out the area in the back, remove spot welds, remove the hump that's in the spare tire well, so I can get that 2 cubic foot enclosure for that 15 installed. So that's the next thing we're going to do in the video. So with the evap canister removed, you can see the space we have in here. Now I can drill out all of the spot welds and remove that piece. Alright guys, you can see where I have gone around and opened up between the floor pan of the car and this pump that was in the spare tire well. I still have a few spot welds that I need to get drilled through. I need to go with a larger diameter bit, but to get through this, all I did was snap on polisher sander with a Rolock wheel, and that just cut through right at the seam, got through that seam sealer, and then it was just a matter of prying with my little Joey tool. This is an aircraft skin tool. So time to go to the top side, drill through a few spot welds, and then pull this guy out. So it was at this point in the build where I removed that hump in the spare tire well for that evap canister and saw the massive physical opening I have here that I knew I wasn't going to be putting the SQL 15 in like Nick had wanted. The only proper solution for the car to me was to put one of his IB24s in, because I have the area here for it, but I needed to go to the computer and make sure that the mounting depth and everything would work with the car. Once I went to the computer, I saw that I had room on the top side for the basket to surround and enough room for excursion. At that point, it was measure the bottom side, make sure we're going to have good clearance and the motor's not going to be hanging too low on the bottom side of the car. And everything looked good to me. I called Nick the next morning, pitched the idea to him, and immediately he was on board. It was nothing but like smiles and laughter on the phone call, just because of the sheer absurdity of a 24 in a stealth install. So at this point, we're going to jump into the process of actually making the baffle to mount this 24 in here and what we went through. So here we go. With the panels removed, I have a lot of room here on the sides. I took out this large piece here that had the factory XM unit in it. The Bose subwoofer is out, but I do have this evap canister that I need to relocate in the car. I also took out the factory jack and the housing for it. So now that we're in the car, we have space here on the sides. We've got open area here, lots of space. But what I'm looking at is, if I, is that a 10 millimeter? Look at that. That's a 10 mil. Found a 10 mil. Okay. So what I'm looking at is I have a floor here that needs to go in. But between the floor and the subwoofer, I need 2.5 inches of clearance. And that clearance is going to be for the height of the subwoofer from the mounting surface to the top of the surround. And then I want to make sure we have enough room for the surround to move and not contact the bottom of this floor. So we're going to give 2.5 inches here because it's 1.75 for the subwoofer, and I want to give an extra inch or so to make sure that we're good for clearance. So I've got 2.5 inch block here. That's what we decided on. So what I'm going to do now is take this 2.5 inch block and I'm going to go around the car and I'm going to mark at the bottom of the block around the car using this board here for a reference, and that's going to tell me where my baffle for the subwoofer needs to sit. So I'm going to mark that, and then after I mark where everything will be for the baffle, all the locations around here, I will cut this factory plastic, make my template against the sheet metal, and then when I have that template made, I will have the baffle laser cut. So now it's time to get all of this plastic cut to the proper height, and then we'll get the template made. So now that I've marked the location for everything, I'm going to go ahead. If you notice where this line comes around, this is where the cut line is for this factory plastic. I'm going to go ahead and come around this lip right here at the bottom of it. That should give me the perfect outline for our baffle that's going to go into the car, because I know that I needed to come down this dimension, this 2.5 inches from where the factory floor sits. So with that in place, the floor in place, I come down 2.5 inches, and that's where the subwoofer will sit. So we're good. We're ready to cut this guy out and make our template. Okay, so I've just finished templating the forward half of this piece that will be the sheet metal baffle for the 24. So all I did is I took this factory plastic panel that I measured down. If you guys remember, I measured down from the surface here. I came down and marked my cuts, and I made those cuts. So now that I made those cuts and I know that this is where the baffle is going to sit, I can set this piece on here and use this as a template to cut out the shape of the baffle. But I can't just cut this exact shape. I have to leave a lip around the edge so that it seats on the sheet metal of the car. So on the forward portion, that's easy because I can just set it on a flat surface. Back here, I'm going to have a 2-inch inside radius here that comes up, and I'm going to have a 5-inch outside radius, and then there's a 30-inch that comes around here. There's a 30-inch diameter that would come around right here on the sheet metal. So aside from that, that comes around, and I've got a couple of little inset pieces that I need to make so that it sits into the sheet metal and it notches, and I don't have to weld a bunch of filler panels in. So if I can get this and get it to the plasma and they can cut what I need, it'll just save me a lot of hassle trying to weld in little filler plates. So the next step, I'm going to cut this, trim it up, and then we're going to take it back to the car, use some templates, and figure out what exactly I need to do back here before I take it to the plasma cutter. I've got this portion of the template laid out on this, what is this, whiteboard, just some cheap material, $10 for a 4x8 sheet at Home Depot. But what I want to show you guys, I've got this laid out, and as you can see, I've traced the location of this on another layer. The reason for that is I can put it back in place and have it laid out. Since this half is good to go, I'm now working on this half and getting all the nooks and crannies that are on the back side of this that are so difficult to template. So what I'm using is this guy right here, and I can take this and I can press it against the car at the height that this board, which will be the 3/16 steel baffle for the subwoofer, where that's sitting. So when I put this in place with this piece of template in the car, I press this against the car, press these pieces against the car, and then with it in place, I take the Sharpie and I mark where on the board it is. And I mark there on both sides. On this one I marked each end and across the top. This one I couldn't do it, so I marked one end, the top, and then I marked over here so I have a point to align it with. So with it aligned, I can then trace the pattern of the car onto the second layer. And what I'll do when I have this laid out for the car on the back side, knowing that this is good, I can get this part finalized, and then this bottom layer will be the template. So that's just a simple way of getting complex shapes that otherwise you would be gluing a bunch of popsicle sticks or something to get that shape, whether it's gluing them or just template tape and sticking them down. Instead of using popsicle sticks, I'm just doing this. If the guys with the plasma can't cut it that well, I'll do it by freehand with the plasma. So there's a simple trick. Now I need to get the rest of this sorted and we'll be ready to go. Gap between And there we go. So at that point, I just run the plasma. Now that I've had that baffle trimmed at the metal shop on the plasma cutter and then on the shear, they couldn't do every detail I needed on the baffle to make it fit into the car. So I'm gonna have to do that by hand with the plasma. And what I've done is I've taken this template and I've made it fit so that it sits on the flat surface here on the car, and then as it nests in, you can see it sitting on that flat surface, and then the rest of it nests in so that everything sits pretty flush in the car. So I should have a flat surface once this is welded in. So now I take this template, move it over here to the wood shop, which I guess is doubling as the metal shop, and I put this on here. And even though I have trimmed this this baffle before by hand, you can see where I refined the edges of the template. I still need to trim more off with the handheld plasma. So that is the next step. I'm going to trim this stuff off and then take it back over. I'm going to keep going back and forth. Trim a little, fit it to the car, trim a little, fit it to the car, just back and forth until it fits perfect, and then I'm going to weld it in. So you'll notice I'm using this piece of wood. I use it along here for a straight edge, and I can also use this as the metal gets hot from the cutting. I can use this to rest my hand on. I don't have to worry about heat. Now before I can put this baffle in the car, I want to drill the holes for each of the mounting locations on the basket and then weld in some nuts on the back side of the plate. So you can see I've already got 1, 2, 3 of them drilled. I'm going to go ahead, set up and drill the others, and then once I do that, I can clean the plate, bolt the sub in place, and actually weld the nuts, knowing that everything's located properly for the subwoofer. Now that I have all the holes drilled in this baffle, I can put the subwoofer in place, tighten it down, and from the back side, I can weld the nuts to the plate. So before I do that, I'm going to have to clean all of the WD-40 off here, make sure it's nice and clean, hit the surface of this, get the finish off of it, and then it'll be ready to weld. So as you see here, I've got all of the bolt hole locations prepped so that I'm down to raw metal. It's not the coating on here that protects the metal. I've got it down to the raw metal. So now I can put the subwoofer in and run the bolts through, tighten the nut down on the back side, and weld the nut to the baffle. And with the nut welded to the baffle, then I can come back, clean this up, put some weld through primer on, weld this to the car, and then I can start working on the rest of the structure. The next thing I'll be doing is welding these nuts to the baffle. These nuts are what's going to secure the subwoofer to the baffle, and to weld these in, what I've done is I've bolted the subwoofer in place and tightened the nuts down, and I'm going to weld them with the subwoofer in place. This ensures that any time the subwoofer comes in and out later, if we should have to replace it, remove it, whatever, I know it's always going to line back up. So if we take a look here, we're going to weld this guy in. I've got some stuff here to protect the sub where I'm welding, and I've also got aluminum tape on the threads of the bolt. That aluminum tape is going to keep any slag that may fly up from landing on the threads. So next thing we're going to do is get the welder fired up and get going. So the baffle fits the car, the mounting nuts for the subwoofer are welded to it. Now I need to prep the car for installation of this baffle. I've got to grind paint off of it, clean it, prep it, and that is the next video, is actually putting this guy in the car and seeing that 24 in the car functioning for the first time. Stay tuned.